What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. Before we hop in, just a quick announcement to close out October as well as kick off the month of November. We are running a sale on all TTM products. They are 30% off with the code FALL2025, no space, FALL2025. That code will be active until Wednesday, the 4th of November. And if you're interested in any programs, you can go check those out. There will be links and more details in the description. But that's it for housekeeping. Let's get into the show. Enjoy. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Terminator Training Show. I'm Kevin Smith. Today is what I would consider a long overdue episode. It is going to be overrated, underrated from my Instagram prompt this week. So pretty much what I did is I was going to just ask me a question. I was going to write, ask me a question. And I was like, you know what? I haven't done overrated, underrated in a very long time. I think I have 2 episodes that are this style total in my entire 180, this will be 185 episodes. So definitely long overdue, but was going to write, ask me a question. I'm like, you know what, let's change it up a little bit. So I went with overrated, underrated. Basically you tell me a topic, fitness topic, supplement, idea, method, methodology, philosophy, whatever it is. You'll kind of see once we get into them. And I will give my opinion on whether it's overrated, underrated. And then I'll also explain why and some more context. It's similar to questions, but it's just a little bit more free flowing and I can kind of just take it whatever direction I want. So that's what we're going to try to do. It's a little bit harder to do it that way because my brain, I don't prepare for these things. I don't prompt anything. I just go off the cuff. If I do a single topic episode, I do have notes on my screen, but for Q&As and overrated, underrated, it's just completely off the cuff. So we'll see where it takes us, but I am going to try and keep the responses somewhat short and brief. I'm not going to just brush over everything, but I want to get to a lot of them because I got an insane amount. I got way more topics on this than I usually get for story or for questions, and I usually get quite a few questions. So going to try and get to as many as possible. And yeah, let me know if you guys like this. Shoot me a comment in the YouTube comment section, or if you listen on Spotify, let me know if you like it, and I'll do them more often. I won't do them like super frequently, but maybe like every 15 to 20 episodes or something like that, just to change the pace up. So let's hop into it. First overrated, underrated question is 2000s rap and hip hop. I would say highly underrated. Probably late 90s, early 2000s is like the best decade-ish of hip-hop, in my opinion. Especially for conventional, like non-underground hip-hop, like actual hip-hop that a lot of people will listen to and a lot of people know, record deals, Biggie, Tupac, P. Diddy, etc. People like that, not necessarily underground rap. I personally am a huge fan of underground rap, and I would say, honestly, most of my favorite underground rap songs are also from around the mid 2000s, early 2000s, maybe late 2000s, but because they're underground, they're still good. They don't like kind of drink the Kool-Aid of everyone else and just turn into pop or mumble rappers, which if you're a fan of that, great. I personally am not a fan of modern day rap for the most part, other than underground rap. Like if someone just says 2 or 3 words to a beat the entire song and it somehow becomes number one. I'm not going to name any specifics, but you guys may know some big name artists that honestly most of their songs are just like either mumbling or saying random words to a beat, and everyone loves them. But I'm not a huge fan of that. So I am much more of a fan of underground stuff, but I also think that the early 2000s stuff is incredible. So very, very underrated. Next one is CrossFit. Okay, so this might hurt some feelings, but CrossFit is highly overrated for a workout modality for most people in general. If you are extremely genetically gifted and also you want to compete in CrossFit and you have a history of really, really sound quality movement, or maybe you learn sound quality movement from a rare gem of a good CrossFit coach that knows what he, she, or it is doing, then CrossFit can be a good, solid strategy for you. However, most people, even people in that category, eventually run into the point where they no longer can really sustain the conventional CrossFit that we all know. And oddly enough, some of the better CrossFit coaches, there are plenty of them out there, by the way. There are plenty of not great ones, but that kind of applies to a lot of different fitness modalities. But some of the better CrossFit coaches, they don't really even program what you would probably consider CrossFit. They kind of segment or compartmentalize each individual fitness discipline, and they train it kind of separately. Of course, yes, they do certain WODs that combine strength, endurance, skill, etc. But for the most part, like the best, highest performing CrossFit athletes, most of their training kind of looks like hybrid training with a little bit of a twist where they add in certain things like gymnastics or random jump rope stuff or whatever they're coming up with these days. That's the thing about CrossFit, is super random, and it doesn't really have a lot of rhyme or reason in general. The main reason it's overrated for most people, like the general population, not like super gifted genetically young people that like want to compete in it, is because most people sign up, or most people get into some form of training to look better, of course. And CrossFit can definitely help you look better. But at the same time, you're also not going to look like a high-level CrossFit athlete like a lot of people think you will. Those people are extremely genetically gifted. And also, they usually have a history of being strong and jacked. Maybe they're a little less strong and jacked now, but because CrossFit does good CrossFit programming, which the highest level athletes are doing, also involves some hypertrophy training. But the average person getting into CrossFit, expecting to look like a CrossFitter, probably not going to happen unless you have really good genetics, like untapped genetic potential. But also, people like to feel better. They want to be more healthy. They want to live longer. They want to feel better day to day. And CrossFit is probably one of the worst in general. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule. Good CrossFit gyms, good CrossFit coaches. But in general, CrossFit is probably the worst exercise modality that I would recommend to someone if their goal is to feel better day to day. Because CrossFit is intensity based. It's almost has like a race component. Like you are either racing your buddies, you're racing the clock, you're trying to do as many reps as you possibly can in a certain amount of time, or you are basically, you win or you fare better if you go faster. And there's a lot of lifts, especially barbell lifts, that should not be done fast or under fatigue or for high reps. And CrossFit kind of throws all those at the same time into the same type of WODs, like a barbell snatch with muscle ups with box jumps for 21, 15, 9 reps, which, by the way, is the most random rep range that I've ever heard of. And I just still have not heard a sound explanation from a CrossFit coach as to why it makes sense, but I digress. But when you kind of chase intensity, you chase fastness on things that shouldn't be going fast, you're, no matter what, eventually going to run into some issues, especially with intensity. You're going to run into hormone issues potentially. You're going to run into nervous system issues, thyroid issues, because you're just always going to be in this like stressed out state. You do your CrossFit, you get this big cortisol dump because you're going super hard. You might feel really good afterwards, but then that wears off and you feel terrible almost all the time. You might find that you start having brain fog. You might find that you're super fatigued throughout the day. You might find that you're not sleeping well. You might find appetite changes, or you might find you just generally don't feel good, like subjectively just don't feel good. You also might objectively see your labs and realize that your hormones are a little bit out of whack, and or your thyroid, your nervous system, etc. And it's just not a great, healthy way to go about life. And it's also not a great way to feel very good throughout the day. A lot of people who do CrossFit on a regular basis, they feel great, like for an hour or two after their CrossFit session. And then the rest of the day, they barely hang on. And oftentimes they need to stimulate themselves. They need to take a bunch of stimulants just to get into that training session, which is just compounding it. It's temporarily giving you that edge, but it's compounding the potential detrimental effects over time. So I could get way, way more into it, and I could go down a rabbit. I might actually, I think maybe I've done a full episode on why CrossFit sucks for SOF, but I would also say it sucks for like most people also as an exercise modality. Certain aspects of it are great. Doing the big compound lifts, awesome. being really good at proprioception and controlling your body, and certain gymnastic movements are really cool. And if you do them in a reasonable manner, they can be great. But overall, the effects of it, especially the reasons that most people go to train, you're not going to really get that from CrossFit. And I think it's super overrated. I also think, although I used to probably think it was underrated as a sport, I kind of do still think it's underrated as a sport. As far as the athletes, I think they're super duper impressive, and I have nothing but respect for like high level CrossFit competitors, which is totally different than using it as a workout modality versus like being a high level competitor. But the recent events, they're just not very well run, and someone actually died in the CrossFit Games last year, which is obviously a tragedy, but it's just kind of unacceptable and it should not happen. And their leadership / people who are running the show, at least people who were running the show, weren't really doing a very good job. So hopefully they can kind of turn that around. But I would say overall, overrated in a big way. Next question, Norwegian 4x4 or other VO2 max related workouts to prep for selection. Overrated just because they are not as specific as they should be. Now, I'll get into some workouts that are very, very beneficial for selection prep. And as a byproduct of those, you might see your VO2 max go up. But chasing improvements in VO2 max while you're also chasing going to selection is just kind of missing the forest for the trees. So a lot of people are aware that VO2 max is one of the biggest predictors of longevity, how long you're potentially going to live, your potential health span, how long you're going to live in a independent, healthy manner. But it's not like you should go and try and just train for VO2 max. It's kind of like grip. Grip is another one that grip strength is an indicator, or it is correlated to living longer and being more independent for longer. But it's a byproduct of the general training that you're doing, the lifting weights that you do. It's not like if you just train your grip for the rest of your life and just blow everything else off, you're not going to live longer because you have a stronger grip. It's correlative, not causative, and similar to VO2 max. Now, of course, higher VO2 max is going to improve your potential to perform better. And like I said, some of the selection prep stuff that you'll do will inherently, most likely, bring your VO2 max up. But it is also a lot of genetics, and it's harder to manipulate your VO2 max. It takes longer to manipulate your VO2 max than it does, say, to manipulate your lactate threshold, which is like the percentage of your VO2 max that you can operate at for a long period of time. So the reason doing like 4x4s and other VO2 max stuff is not really what I'd recommend is mostly because you're not really doing it based on a known pace or a known goal pace, like you would do 400 meter repeats or 800 meter repeats based on your goal 2 mile pace or goal 5 mile pace, for example. Generally, the 4x4 is you're going as hard as you possibly can for 4 minutes. It is brutal, absolutely, but you're also resting a long period of time. I think the Norwegian 4x4 is 4 minutes of rest in between, which is necessary if you're going really, really hard for that session. But if you think about a standard repeat workout, you're usually, I can't think of almost any repeats where 4 minutes of rest would be appropriate. Maybe mile repeats if you're going really, really hard on the mile repeats. But honestly, the way I program mile repeats and repeats in general is I don't program them for guys to go all out. I program them for guys to be able to, guess what? Repeat them because they're repeats. And as such, they can't go all out on every single one. If they go all out on the first one and oh, by the way, I'm not giving them complete rest, which generally speaking on repeats, there's exceptions to this, but generally speaking, you don't rest completely after each one. It may be like a 1 minute jogging rest, or if you're super fit, maybe like a 25-second jogging rest, or maybe if it's like an 800, you might do a 3 minute rest. Half of that's running or jogging, half of that's walking, something like that. But it's not complete. You're not fully fresh going into the next one like you would for a standard VO2 max workout. Of course, you're not fully fresh because you just did one before and you're a little fatigued from that, but you kind of get the picture with the longer rest periods. So, like I said, doing those repeats, absolutely. Threshold runs, tempo runs, and anything in between, all will have, if anything, a neutral effect on your VO2 max. Most likely they'll bump it up a little bit over time, done consistently. but really they're going to increase your lactate threshold, and your lactate threshold is a lot more manipulatable. I don't know if that's a word. Easier to manipulate than your VO2 max, and it's a lot more relevant as well. So the most relevant thing too is neither of these things. It's, can you run fast enough? Can you ruck fast enough? Can you continue to ruck day after day after day? Of course, that's just the endurance component of it. There's strength component as well. So I usually recommend people don't get caught up in the minor details like this. I would rather them think of their goal. I want to run a 5 mile in 35 minutes or faster, or I want to run a 2 mile in 12:45 or faster, and focus mostly on that. And as a byproduct, your VO2 max will increase, and you potentially will live longer if you continue to do cardio for the rest of your life on a consistent basis. So that's my stance on that one. Next one, overrated, underrated, using a fan while you sleep. This is actually really underrated. And it's not just because it keeps you a little bit cooler. It's not because of the noise in your, like the white noise like sound in your room, although those are very beneficial. If you have like a not too loud, not crazy loud fan, but loud enough so you can hear it, loud enough so like if you have someone next to you, it maybe drowns out their breathing noises, or probably not their snoring. If you sleep with a snorer, you're kind of out of luck. But a fan on like 1 or 2 or something like that is really nice for some people. Some people prefer silence. They might wear earplugs if they sleep with someone else, or if they're just single and they sleep by themselves, they just prefer silent. I personally like a little bit of white noise, so I use the fan every night. Not just for that reason though. Another big benefit of having a fan is it circulates the air in your room, which is duh, of course it does. But if you have like an enclosed room, so your windows are closed, your door's closed, it's a closed space, and you have especially more than one person in your room. So like maybe you're sleeping with your wife, maybe you're sleeping with dogs in your bed, which we do, which is, not optimal, but we do anyway because we love our dogs. And that is kind of a breeding ground for a lot of CO2 buildup. And when you're just breathing in, rebreathing your CO2 all night, you're not going to sleep as well. You're not going to feel as good. Your CO2 tolerance is actually going to potentially decrease, and it's not great for your health, mainly because it's not great for your sleep. Even if you don't notice it, you don't feel it, it's still not really benefiting you, especially if you have several people breathing in there and it's an enclosed room, no windows open, nothing. So having that fan on, whether you have windows open or not, it would ideally, if you have windows open, even better, but you don't have to, depending on the time of year, you don't have to do that, but the fan actually circulates that air. So optimal, like the optimal way to do it would be to have it kind of near your face. So it's just every time you breathe out, that CO2 is not going to be rebreathed in, at least not right now, because the fan's going to kind of blow it. I personally don't like it right on my face because I find that it like dries my nose out overnight. I use mouth tape, so my mouth is completely closed and I breathe only through my nose. And if it's like the fan, I kind of put the fan down towards my legs. And if I face it up towards my face, it's just kind of like blowing up my nose. And I don't like that. So I kind of put it on like my midsection / lower body. So I don't really even feel it because I'm under the blankets, but it still is definitely a beneficial and underrated. That's an underrated reason to use a fan or consider using a fan. It's not just because of the noise or the coolness. Not that fans won't cool off the room. They'll just kind of make the whatever air temperature is move around more. So you still want to make sure that your temperature is managed. You want your sleep environment, your sleep temperature to be in that 65 to 68 degree range for optimal sleep. But having that fan also is a really underrated thing, especially compounded long-term. Like not using a fan one night, not a big deal, but long-term, like every single night, having slightly better sleep because you're not rebreathing your CO2 as much is absolutely a beneficial thing and non-trivial at all. So that's why it is underrated. Next question. Not questions. Next overrated, underrated, swim sessions. So swim sessions, I'm going to keep this in the context of military / SOF. I would say swim sessions are underrated or maybe properly rated if you're prepping for a swim event or a triathlon, or if you're going to dive school or something like that, then yeah, absolutely do your swimming. Properly rated, maybe even underrated. I don't know. Overrated, however, for general military population, just based on my observation and my experience. Here's the deal about swimming. Because it's very low impact, It's a lot less stressful on the body than running and rucking, especially, but like other forms of cardio as well, because you're swimming, there's no impact and it feels kind of good. And it really shouldn't beat you up all that much. Although if you're not a very skilled swimmer, you might be sore after a swim session, or if you just don't swim very often and you go and do a 1,000-meter breaststroke or something like that, you're going to have sore lats and triceps and things like that the next day. But in general, it doesn't really beat up your joints, which is great. There's no eccentric component at all, no impact. However, because of that, a lot of people, especially in the military, I don't really get why it's such a military thing. I feel like it's just like something that's cycled around, made its rounds. Like a lot of things in the military, like ideas, just one person thinks it's a good idea and everyone kind of catches on and no one really knows why. But swimming is a great example of this. People think because it's lower stress than most other forms of cardio that swimming is has like a neutral effect on your recovery. So for example, if you have a rest day on your program, a lot of people are under the impression, and I'm not joking, that swimming on a rest day will either have a neutral effect, so it won't affect recovery at all. Some people even think it is going to enhance recovery and make you recover faster. Now, if you're going and splashing around for like 10 minutes or just hanging out in the water, enjoying yourself, get some sun, it can enhance recovery for sure, but not because of the swimming, because you're enjoying yourself, you're relaxed, you're not stressed out, you're getting sunlight, you're probably with friends, things like that. That's great. But actually going and doing like a 60-minute zone 2 swim is still a workout. It's still a stressor on your body. It still needs to be recovered from. You still exerted yourself. So it's not like this get out of jail free, like do at your own leisure type thing. Of course, like depends on your goals, depends on what your training program looks like, but it's not like a substitution for a rest day. So that for that reason, I think a lot of people are just like, oh, well, I could take a rest day today, but I'm just going to swim instead, which is basically the same thing. Or I'm just going to swim instead, which is going to enhance my recovery. In general, doing more things is almost never a good idea to recover better. Doing fewer things is almost always the right answer to recover better. Yes, there's active recovery, being slightly active throughout the day, going for some walks, etc. is a good idea, but your best bets for recovery are sleeping as much as you can and as well as you can, eating as well as you can, being hydrated, not being stressed out, hanging out with people that make you feel good, make you laugh, are easy to be around, just your good friends, your family, and time. Like a certain amount of time is necessary to recover. Doing more things like recovery workouts or recovery EMOMs or recovery AMRAPs or a 90-minute zone 2 recovery session, but it's not impact, so it's good for recovery. It's not. So that is the main reason in that context why I think swim sessions are overrated. However, swimming in general is great, and you can absolutely do swimming if you want. It's a great modality for cross training. Like if you have a non-running day, not a rest day, but like a non-running or rucking day. And for example, in selection prep or something like that, I have swim session options in my ruck run lift program as well. And those are not rest days. It's not like to replace a rest day. It's just to give your body a stimulus, but not an impactful one, so that you don't beat your joints up, but still it does require some recovery. So that is kind of the lowdown on swimming. And that's just kind of my observation and opinion. You could definitely argue otherwise, but that's what I'm sticking with. Next one, TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. Okay, so I'm going to say overrated, and I'm going to explain why. By the way, I might not get to as many as I planned on because these are really good ones, and I think they deserve a little bit more thorough explanation. Overrated because especially today, and it's just going to continue to compound and get worse and worse and worse, but it's so popular and so known about and so talked about, which is a good thing. It's good to be aware of these things, like on the internet, it's fine, but it's also available everywhere. There's hormone clinics left and right, especially if you live in like a built up urban area. They're all over the place around here, and it's hit or miss whether you're going to get a good one or a bad one. Make sure if you do ever go this route, make sure you really vet the establishment that is caring for you and giving you your TRT and telling you how to dose it, and hopefully not giving you immediately an AI or something like that. A lot of places do that, and it's dumb. I won't get into all the physiology and things like that, but just pharmacology, but that is just an example. However, because of that, a lot of guys are kind of going to TRT as their first resort without trying any sort of lifestyle interventions to improve their T naturally. And generally speaking, there are exceptions to this, but usually when you have low T, it's because of things you're doing or not doing in your life, that if you start doing them or stop doing the things that aren't helping your testosterone levels, then they're going to naturally increase and improve. And as a byproduct of stopping doing those things or starting doing things that you should be doing, you are going to improve other aspects of your health, not just your testosterone levels. Where people go wrong is they have all these bad habits and they know that if they take testosterone, they're going to feel better. They're going to make some more muscle gains. They're going to be more motivated, and that's all great. But they're still going to have all these bad habits that are detrimental to their health in other areas that don't involve testosterone, which is one hormone in the body. Yes, testosterone, having solid levels of testosterone will affect other hormones. It'll affect other bodily functions, but it's not this one magic thing that's just going to make you really, really healthy and really vigorous and just a stud if you still have all of your bad habits that resulted in your testosterone lowering. So basically, you're just going to be a really unhealthy person with really bad habits, but you're going to have high T. And yeah, you're going to feel a little better than you would if you have low T, but not by much. And I can't think of more of a waste of money, resources, and potential performance improvements than going on TRT, but not trying to clean anything else up in your life. You're basically getting a little bit of an adjunct, probably a 5 to 10 to 15% adjunct across the board. So why not maximize all your other stuff? Why not get better sleep? Why not get leaner? Why not eat better? Why not manage your stress better? Why not quit drinking? And so, or reduce your drink, whatever it is. Why not stop slamming 8 cups of coffee every day? If you do all that, you're just going to feel that much better. And you're going to be this good habit person with really good habits and really good overall health, and also high testosterone. That's a win-win. So for that reason, I think it's very overrated. But it could also, you could make an argument of it being underrated too, because there are lots of great candidates for TRT that are, doing most things right, and they're trying, and for whatever reason, it's not really improving their testosterone, whether they know it or not. A lot of people just don't even get labs done, so they don't even know that they have low testosterone, and they don't even know what their testosterone level is, let alone all the other things you'll see on a lab. And so they go about life kind of shorthanded or handicapped when they could use that adjunct again to kind of enhance the habits that they already built, and they're going to feel much better. And honestly, your objective health will be better. Even if you're on TRT and it's the right dose for you, and it puts you in the high normal range and you're otherwise healthy, versus if you have low T, you are going to be significantly healthier with high T, even if it is from an exogenous source. So long-term low testosterone has a bunch of downstream negative health effects that you don't want, and just day-to-day quality of life is not great. So if you are a good candidate for it, it's underrated. Like you should hop on, or you should consider talking to someone to hop on, and you're going to feel way, way better. But I think the older generation, I would say, like people who are currently 50 plus, like my dad had never heard of TRT until like recently when we talked about it, and he's 63. And honestly, he's probably a good candidate for it, but he's probably not really going to go on it. Here's the thing, like, because testosterone is also used in high doses for bodybuilders, and there could be some there absolutely are some potential detrimental health effects, both acute and long-term, from high dose testosterone bodybuilder doses. A lot of people think that TRT is just like this taboo thing, and you shouldn't mess with it. Now, some people do abuse their TRT. They go TRT plus or sports TRT, that a lot of people call it, which, it's not really TRT then. It's more of just a PED, which, I mean, TRT is technically a PED, but you kind of get what I'm saying. But for the most part, like, a lot of people are just closed off to it and not really open-minded because it has the word testosterone in it. And most people think that means like you're cheating and doing something bad. So that's my view on it. Overrated overall, but potentially underrated for certain people. Next one is inverted rows and TRX face pulls. So inverted rows and TRX face pulls, if you have no, like very minimal equipment, maybe you have a squat rack and a barbell and TRX, and maybe you have some plates too, I would guess. If you had a squat rack and a barbell, you have plates, but you don't really have dumbbells, you don't have machines, you don't have cables, then these could be excellent options. Face pulls in general, whether it's TRX or cable, or you could do like power face pulls using a sled, you could use banded face pulls, aren't really like this super amazing needle moving exercise. I do think they're a great way to kind of warm up your shoulders and your upper back, either on a pressing day or a pulling day or an upper body day. But I wouldn't say they're like this game changing exercise that's going to like add slabs of muscle or make you super strong. So that's kind of the overall skinny, at least in my opinion, on face pulls. Doing it with a TRX, yeah, like I said, you can do it if you don't have access to other things, but it's not very scalable. It's not very progressible other than adding reps or adding sets, which you're going to end up hitting. There's going to be some sort of limit to that. You can't just do it forever and still get the same benefits. Whereas if you have a cable stack, you just increase the load, or you can do double progression. You add a few reps till you get to the top end of the rep range, and then next time you go up and you're back down at the bottom, so on and so forth. Just makes a lot more sense. So overall, overrated, unless, of course, you don't have access to anything else. But I would still say like the TRX face pulls are, maybe properly rated. Inverted rows, assuming you don't have just a barbell and that's like the only pulling movement that you can do, then it's great. But I would much rather someone do a chest supported row. I'd much rather someone do a cable row. I'd much rather someone do a pull down, a pull up. Yes, those are vertical pulls, but kind of get the picture. Or if you are keen on using a rack and a bar contraption, I would rather someone do rack chins, which is basically, it's very similar to an inverted row, but your butt kind of sags down. Your body's like in an L shape or a jackknife position, and your feet are up on a box or a bench or something similar, and you're holding onto the bar. Basically what it does is put your torso a little bit less vertical, and it's a better line of pull for the lats. But most importantly, it requires way less shoulder mobility, and it can be trained close to or to failure way more safely than pull-ups. Taking pull-ups to failure, I mean, you guys have probably heard me talk about it in the past, but going to failure on pull-ups, and then a lot of people go beyond failure on pull-ups because it's easy to do. You can just use some momentum, use some body English, and so on and so forth, is a great way to get more reps, I guess, but it's also a great way to grind your shoulders up or elbows or both over time, and it's not great. Whereas rack chins, they're really hard to cheat. It's more of a closed chain exercise because your feet are stationary on a box or a bench. And if you want to load it too, super easy to load. You either put a medicine ball on your lap, you could put a barbell plate on your lap, you could put a dumbbell on your lap, you could wear a weight vest if you want. I guess you could wear a weight vest for TRX rows, but it's kind of hard to like retract and protract your scapula when you have a weight vest on. So I would say these things are overrated unless, of course, you have no equipment, then they're underrated. But one of my kind of, maybe not pet peeves, but one thing that like really bewilders me when I go to the gym is seeing people use a minimal equipment tool like a band or a TRX right next to what would be a way better option. So for example, doing banded face pulls right next to a cable. The band is really only going to give you a lot of stimulus when you're pretty close to locked out. Think of a face pull as you are closer to your face. Your muscles are your upper back muscles are in the short position, which is not a very important position you don't get a ton of stimulus when you're overloading just the short position at all. It's better than nothing, but if you had a cable, it would just be providing constant tension the entire time. It'd be way more effective. But I think people kind of just see that, oh, that banded face pull looks really cool, or that TRX curl looks so much cooler than a barbell curl or a dumbbell curl or whatever have you for curls. And so they do it. And It's not like a bad thing, I guess. But if your goal is to like kind of maximize your efficiency and the time spent in the gym and you want to get the most out of it, then using the right tool for the job, in which case this would be a machine row or a cable face pull, would be a better option than the TRX and the inverted rows. Next one, intermittent fasting, another overrated one. And I'm going to explain why. So intermittent fasting can have lots of benefits for certain people. Some people, honestly, probably shouldn't fast, especially those with histories of eating disorders that aren't obsessively eating every 2 hours, in which case intermittent fasting would be really good for you if you have like a bro eating disorder where you think you're going to waste away if you miss a meal or something like that. Intermittent fasting can be great to kind of just prove to yourself that it's not going to happen. But if you have a history of like anorexia, bulimia, anything like that, it's basically like giving a recovering alcoholic a freebie. Like, hey, drink these 2 drinks, but they don't count. Like, don't worry about them. It's kind of just enabling your past eating disorder and probably potentially going to bring it back. I'm not an eating disorder expert, so take it with a grain of salt, but someone like that, I would highly recommend not intermittent fasting. Additionally, I would not recommend intermittent fasting to most people. I would say most people watching this, other than like a periodic 1-day fast, 2-day fast, maybe 3-day fast, like maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Doing like the daily time restricted eating, daily fast, which is probably what this person's asking about because it's way more common and popular. A lot of people do this every day. Can be great. It can be a great way to manage your calories. But if you are a hard charging, always on the go, type A individual, which again is probably most people listening to this, going long periods of time without food is not a good thing. Honestly, eating within an hour of when you wake up would be best for someone like that, especially if you have a history of doing a lot of fasting, or if you know that your thyroid, you know that your nervous system is all out of whack. You may have like hormone issues, really high cortisol. Doing even a morning fast where you do like the 18-6 or 16-8 is probably the 2 most common ones, is a great way to feel really good during the fast. But the reason you're feeling good is not necessarily a beneficial reason for your body, for your health, for your long-term well-being, because you feel really good because fasting is a stressor and your body releases cortisol, which is a stress hormone, in higher amounts when you're fasting. It's kind of this evolutionary thing. Like back in the day, it was really hard to get food. And so even though you don't have food giving you energy, you're trying to go get your next hunt, that cortisol hormone is going to kind of override the fact that you shouldn't be energetic. So I call cortisol the override hormone. It is higher when you don't sleep well. It is also higher when you're just generally stressed. And it also gets higher when you go a long period of time without food, especially if you throw stimulants on it. People will say, oh, I feel so good when I'm fasting and I just sip black coffee and have nicotine all day. It's like, yeah, you'd probably feel really good and focused, and your cognition's probably amazing, and so on and so forth. And doing this once in a while, like when you really, really need to be on your game, not a big deal. But doing it every day, it's just adding up and compounding down the line. You're eventually not going to feel very good because your cortisol is going to be way out of whack. It's going to be high at the wrong times of day. Or it could be, some people get to where their cortisol is super low and like super burnt out. And that's not good either. With hormones, here's the thing. A lot of people think cortisol is bad and testosterone is good, so on and so forth. That's not the case. Your body doesn't have these like hormones that are helpful for you and then also hormones that are trying to hurt you or kill you or give you a disease. The bad stuff happens when your hormones are either too high or too low. There's a Goldilocks zone for basically everything in the body, not just hormones, blood markers, and all that stuff too. So having super high or super low cortisol is just not a good thing. And that is why for the like soft population, the hard chargers, people like me, honestly, like I've done intermittent fasting in the past. I felt great, but now I'm kind of paying for it, where I just kind of have been burning the candle at both ends for a long period of time. And my coach has me on, he basically is like, you got to eat carbohydrates, animal fats within the first hour that you wake up to kind of get your hormone, your thyroid back in check. And a great rudimentary way to see where you're at as far as thyroid and nervous system function is to take your temperature a few times throughout the day. I take it in the morning and then I take it after each meal. The ideal human temperature is something like 98.6, 98.7, 98.8, 98.5. Most people, including me right now, are in the 97s. Some people are in the 96s. And you might feel that throughout the day. You might feel cold all the time. You might have really cold, clammy hands, cold, clammy feet. And that's usually because you've just been kind of going too hard and you're kind of burning the candle at both ends, and your body's just telling your nervous system is it's not functioning the way it could be, and you're therefore not going to feel the way you could feel. So you kind of got to work yourself back. Animal fats like egg yolks, and eating carbohydrates also releases insulin, and insulin can put a little bit of a dimmer switch on your cortisol levels. You want your cortisol relatively high in the morning, but if you have some carbohydrates, if you're just a generally high cortisol person, having that little dimmer by eating some carbs is a good thing. And then animal fats as well for thyroid. So I would say if you're using intermittent fasting strategically once in a while for digestive health or spiritual reasons, that's probably the best reason to use it is like spiritual, like detaching from food, then it can be great. But daily intermittent fasting, especially for a high-strung, high-stress individual, is just not a really good thing, even though you might feel really good. And by the way, I thought before a few weeks ago, I was kind of under the impression that like the only way that I could crush my mornings cognitively, because I do most of my cognitive tasks in the morning, is to fast. And that's not the case. If you clean up your diet and eat whole foods, like very, very much clean it up, eat whole foods, you're going to feel great throughout the day. I eat breakfast at like 6 a.m. now, an hour and a half after I get up, and I never would have done that because I do a bunch of work after that, and I feel totally fine. I usually eat breakfast, get out for a walk, and then come back and work, and I feel great. So that is my spiel on intermittent fasting. Do as you please. All right, next one, we're going to go a little bit faster here. Not super rapid fire, but I'm going to try and get to several more in the next, let's say, 15, 20 minutes. So next one is sauna for heat acclimation. Yes, so that's very underrated. Not necessarily just the sauna itself, but doing heat like ensuring that you're acclimated or acclimatized to the heat, especially if you're going to perform in the heat, is huge. It's honestly, for safety reasons and performance reasons, it's pretty much non-negotiable. If you're going to selection and you think it might be hot, or if you're doing a race or you're doing some sort of endurance event and it's going to be hot and or humid during that period of time, and you don't do any sort of intentional heat training. By the way, I don't remember what episode it is, but I have a full episode all on heat training, so I'm not going to get super into the details, into the weeds on this. But if you don't do any of it, you're going to be less safe. You're going to be higher potential to get some sort of heat injury and or maybe even die. Like people die every single year in the military because they are not acclimated to the heat and they overexert themselves, and their body just kind of cooks from the inside. Their brain cooks from the inside. It's not good. But if you intentionally and strategically use heat training to improve your tolerance to the heat, then you are significantly lowering your risk. You're not completely eliminating it. You still could get a heat injury, but you're significantly lowering it. Additionally, you're going to perform way, 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 way better if you're acclimated than if you're not. So using a sauna itself is a great option, especially for those who don't live in a climate that's hot. So say you're in Alaska and you're going to selection in May and it's not really that hot. You can't really train in the heat, because training in the heat is also a great way to improve your heat tolerance. But if that's not an option for you, a sauna would be great. And most people can at least finagle their way to having access to a sauna. Lots of gyms have them. Worst case scenario, you don't need a sauna. You can just take a hot bath. There's really no excuse. You can take a hot bath if you want, and that will work too. But that's a great use case for it. Additionally, even if you do live in an area where it's hot, training in the heat is also just going to add a little bit of an extra stressor. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Honestly, the most effective way to improve your heat tolerance for an event is to actually train that exact modality. Say you're doing a running race, it's to train running in the heat. However, it is more stressful that way. It's going to be a little more of a recovery burden. So what you could do is usually 3 to 4 heat exposures. I usually lean towards 4 heat exposures per week is great. So you could do like 2 of your runs throughout the week in hotter parts of the day. And the other 2 exposures, you could use the sauna. Sauna would be passive heat training, not really training, but like passive heat acclimation, running out in the heat would be active. And kind of splitting them up like that would be a really good strategy. So again, go listen to that episode if you want. If you type in Terminator training, heat training on YouTube or on Spotify, it should pop up and you can learn all about it if you want. It's really important for most of the people listening to this who are eventually probably going to want to perform in hot weather, but it's highly underrated. Pros, high-level endurance athletes are really starting to catch on to this. They're doing it. It's a massive advantage. If you don't do heat, I should say if you don't do heat training, even if, and this is the crazy thing, even if you're going to perform in comfortable weather, it still can benefit you. There's a bunch of physiological benefits of heat training that transfer to even normal weather performance. But the ones, if for whatever reason an endurance athlete does not, an elite endurance athlete decides not to do heat training, they're putting themselves at a massive handicap compared to the field. So it's kind of non-negotiable. But that is my down and dirty on heat training. Very, very underrated. Next question, switch grip on deadlifts, over under. Highly overrated. And that is the case for everyone other than competitive powerlifters who can lift the most weight this way. Now, you might be thinking, well, I'm not a competitive powerlifter and I like to deadlift and I can lift the most weight this way. Why is it overrated for me? Well, A, your deadlift probably only matters to you. Not a lot of people are probably interested in your 1 rep max deadlift. So there's that. If you have to switch out your grip a little bit and it results in you not being able to lift quite as much for long-term benefits, probably worth it. But the main reason, there's 2 big reasons that I don't like the over-under. And I'm going to explain some caveats here too, and I'm going to explain what I would recommend doing as well. Over-under grip basically means your one palm is facing one way, one palm's facing the other way, and it is a stronger grip than double overhand on a deadlift, like significantly stronger. There's no debating that. But what it does is one shoulder is more externally rotated, one shoulder is more internally rotated. And if you do that all the time, deadlift session after deadlift session, week after week, month after month, year after year, you're going to start developing some imbalances. And they maybe even be visible imbalances, especially in your upper back, especially in your mid upper back area, because you're getting a slightly different stimulus, I would say, on the upper back muscles because your arms are in slightly different static positions. These imbalances are not always problematic. Like everyone's got slight imbalances side to side, no matter what, whether you can see it or not, whether you can feel it or not, but they can be problematic. And if there's a way to get around it and just avoid finding out whether they're going to be problematic or not, then I would take it. And again, I'm going to tell you how to do that in a second. But 2, I've never seen this in person, but I've seen it a lot in videos. It is that outward facing arm that's facing away from you is in a very vulnerable position for the bicep tendon, the distal bicep tendon, especially, which is right near the elbow. I've seen a lot of videos of people tearing their bicep from doing a deadlift. And that, if you're a competitive powerlifter and you're training, like that's kind of part of the process. But if you're not, and you're training your deadlift to look better or feel better or perform better tactically or whatever it is, totally not worth tearing your bicep over. Not fun at all. Acutely not fun because it's probably going to hurt, and long-term not fun because it's going to take a while to recover. So totally not worth it. And it's also overrated because there's a couple other options that are pretty simple. And honestly, if you put some time into the one I'm going to talk about first, probably you'll end up, unless you have tiny hands, you'll end up being able to hold more weight that way than you will with the over-under. And that is the hook grip. I am a former over-under guy, and I switched to the hook grip. At first, it was really, really painful on my thumbs. Yes, it is painful on your thumbs at first, but your thumbs adapt, just like every part of your body adapts to repeated exposure of stressors. So your thumbs adapt. Takes a few weeks probably of consistent deadlifting. What I recommend doing for most people is to, if you want to switch to hook grip, do your warm-up reps, your ramp-up sets, as heavy as you can get with hook grip before your thumbs are just excruciatingly painful, and then switch to either your over-under grip or the other option that's also a little bit safer, using straps. Straps are a little bit, it depends on the person, I'll get into it in a second, but that's what I recommend. And week to week or session to session, you'll notice that you can do more warm-up. You can do higher warm-up weights with that hook grip, and eventually you're just gonna be able to, you're not even gonna really think twice of how it feels in your thumb. You're just going to be able to do it. You're going to be able to do it for your work sets. I can hold significantly more weight. I used to sometimes occasionally fail deadlifts because my outward hand, it would kind of slip, and it was a grip thing. I have never failed a deadlift because of grip, even on failed reps. Like when I finished my 50K prep and I tried 585, I pulled it off the ground, probably up to like my mid shins, but my grip was fine. I couldn't lock out the weight because of other parts of my body were not strong enough. But it is a very secure grip. And the best thing about the hook grip is it doesn't really require a lot of grip strength. You have to have a little bit of grip strength, but it's mostly reliant on physics, on friction between your thumb and your index finger, and part of your middle finger is usually the way I do it. The other day, just for content reasons, I did a warm-up rep with 315 on deadlifts, and I intentionally left my ring finger and pinky finger off the bar. And I pulled it totally fine. I literally just used friction between my thumb and my index finger and my middle finger, other fingers off the bar, and it was totally fine. So the hook grip is very, very secure. And again, it just takes a little bit of time to work your way into it. And also you have to have at least decent size hands. Or you could use straps. Straps are great if you are not ego lifting. So what I use straps for is generally my back off sets. I'll do like a top set of deadlifts where I'll do the hook grip, just natural, nothing other than chalk. And then for higher rep stuff, I'll use straps just because it does, even when your thumb is kind of adapted to it, it does kind of get a little bit painful when you're doing 6 reps, 7 reps, especially heavy. So I'll just use straps for that. Why not? And also it just beats your hands up less, beats your thumbs up less. So makes sense. But a lot of people will use straps. Basically, there's no way they'd be able to lift this amount of weight without straps, with whatever other grip, whatever non-strap grip they use. But because they have straps, they can hold on to it. So they probably aren't going to lock the lift out. But generally, if the lift's way too heavy and you don't have straps on, usually you're just going to drop it. It's like the natural thing to do. If you're strapped into it, especially the strongman straps that have like the full loops that go over, and you try to grind through that, like you're just putting yourself, every second you continue grinding through that, you're just putting yourself at more risk of messing yourself up. And for what reason? And it's usually really ugly and kind of honestly a little bit pathetic looking. So straps can be great if used properly, but just use with caution. Don't use them to ego lift. If you are dead set on the over under, okay, just make sure that you rotate your grip, which hand faces out, which hand faces in every time you train. Or you could do it, I don't necessarily recommend doing it set to set. Some people can do that and be fine if you're like not as strong, okay. But generally just do it session to session. So this week I'm going to have my left hand facing out. This week I'm going to have my right hand facing out. And guess what? You're probably going to be stronger one way than the other way. That's just kind of something you're going to have to accept. You might be able to catch it up if you're just used to doing it a certain way and you maybe spend a period of time doing it the other way as well. You might catch it up, but you might be not quite as strong. It's just going to feel a little bit less comfortable, and you're going to have to accept that and be aware of it. So I would recommend not worrying about it and using the hook grip or using straps. That would be usually a better option. So I would say overrated overall. Next one is creatine. Creatine is going to be, I'm going to say properly rated, because a lot of people overrate it and a lot of people underrate it. So like right in the middle there is properly rated. So why would creatine be overrated? A lot of people think that creatine is like, you have to take it or else you're going to waste away and die. A lot of people think that when they start taking creatine, it's going to be like this PED-like experience where they're just going to gain a ton of muscle and a ton of strength, and they're just going to be setting PRs left and right. If you've never taken it and you're somewhat newer to lifting or something like that, you're going to be a little bit stronger pretty much right off the bat. Once the creatine kind of saturates, it takes a little while, but you're going to be a little stronger and you might gain a little bit more muscle. Honestly, a lot of the muscle is going to be kind of like transient because it increases intracellular water. So you basically you hold more water in your muscle cells, which is a good thing, but it's not necessarily like building new tissue. But the downstream effects of continuing to lift, and creatine can help with lifting. Yes, you'll build new tissue, but if you look really jacked, like right when you start taking creatine, a few weeks after, it saturates into your muscle cells, then it's probably not a bunch of new lean tissue. It's probably mostly water. And a lot of people also misconstrue the water weight gain. They think it's bloat. It's not bloat. It is intramuscular water retention, which is honestly a good thing. It's like hydrating. So, and it replenishes your ATP, which is like the powerhouse for work, a lot faster. So it's a good thing, but it's definitely not a PED. So if you think like that, it's definitely overrated. Underrated because a lot of people think it's still just like a bodybuilder type thing or a muscle building thing. Like, I don't like going to the gym and lifting weights, so creatine, no, I'm not going to take it. Creatine can benefit pretty much anyone. Of course, there are exceptions, but for the most part, it's a very safe, very studied, and very effective supplement. Effective, though, is relative. Compared to other supplements, it's effective. That doesn't mean, like I said, it's not going to make you superhuman, but it is effective. And as far as I know, it's the most studied supplement in existence. But a lot of people think that if they take it, they're going to start getting jacked or they have to go lift or whatever. Not the case. Creatine is great in general for brain health. It's also great for cognition. If you take higher doses, like 10, 15, 20 grams a day, you can see cognitive benefits. You can, in some cases, I think it was a recent study. I am not 100% sure. I might mess up some of the details, but there was a recent study where they kind of tested creatine after a really bad night of sleep, like very insufficient sleep. High dose creatine, I think they used 30 grams, can kind of negate the acute effects of bad sleep as far as the way you perceive things. So this is not to say that like you can just give up on sleep and take 30 grams of creatine every day and you're going to be fine. You're still going to get the downstream effects of bad sleep. But if it's like this one-off thing, and maybe say you had a red eye or something like that, or you traveled and you just couldn't get any sleep or barely got any sleep, and you up your creatine dose the next day, you might feel better and you might perform better, you might think better. So creatine can also be great for like TBI recovery. It can also be a prophylactic for reducing the magnitude of a potential TBI that you may get. Say you're a soft guy and you're going on target, and at minimum, you're probably going to eat some charges. At minimum, you're going to hear a lot of loud bangs around you, guns going off. Those are like little mini TBIs. Well, a big charge, if you're close enough to it, is like, could give you like a serious TBI. But all those noises are like little mini TBIs. So, and of course, you could get like a serious TBI, like maybe you get thrown off something, or maybe you get blown up, or maybe whatever it is. And you can kind of take creatine as like a prophylactic. So in those scenarios, very, very underrated, very underrated. But in the scenario where you think it's just going to make you the Hulk, it is overrated. So just take it. It's a cheap supplement and it's not going to hurt you. Most likely. I mean, some people have, rare cases, people have negative effects from creatine, like GI issues, but for the most part, it is good to go. Next one, barbell strict press. So this is going to be overrated and this is going to be controversial and it might make some people mad, but hear me out. The barbell overhead press, strict press, whatever you want to call it, is a very fundamental movement pattern and it's a very effective lift on paper. Pressing things overhead is something that most lifters should do most of the time, most of their training weeks. However, doing it with a barbell for, I would say, the vast majority of lifters who aren't like really, really serious about it. So like, you know, I would say CrossFit, high-level CrossFit competitors, Olympic lifters are definitely exceptions to this. But if you're not really, really, really serious about your execution of the overhead press and you're not able to drop your ego and leave it at the door and train within your limits, then it is a great way to just have mysterious, quote unquote, shoulder issues or neck issues, or even lower back. Guys mess their lower back up sometimes from just overarching it when they're trying to push way more weight than they should be pushing over their head. And the average person just lacks the overhead shoulder mobility to do that safely and over again and on a regular basis. So, two options. You can either improve your mobility and really take the lift seriously, really practice it. Practicing lifts, like doing certain lifts that you're not really trying to get like a workout in, you're trying to practice the technique. You can do this with squats, you can do it with bench press, you can do it with overhead press. It's less fatiguing that way. Yeah, you're not going to get super jacked from your practice sessions, but you're going to potentially get more jacked down the line because you're getting better at it. You're getting better at the movement. The more often you do a movement, shocker, the better you're going to get at it. So if you're inclined to do that with the barbell overhead press. And I would say this is like the barbell squat and the barbell bench press would be things that I really, really recommend taking execution seriously if you care about your shoulder health and elbow health and maybe neck health and maybe lower back health. And for squats, maybe your hip health and knee health. But if you're not going to do that, that's fine too. There's other options that are a lot more universally shoulder friendly and joint friendly than the barbell overhead press. Even just using dumbbells and making your grip a little bit more neutral puts your shoulders in a much better position, kind of tucking your elbows a little bit. Certain machines are great, certain machines aren't great, kind of finding the right one for you. If you're a machine nerd like me, really easy and fun to kind of like pick out how to set up certain machines and find really good ones and determine which ones are good and bad. But for the most part, like most people don't really have that wherewithal. They don't really care about perfect machine setup, and that's totally fine. I would just do dumbbells, or you could use kettlebells. Kettlebells are also great. If you have it like kind of on the outside, it has a little different feel because the center of gravity is different for a kettlebell. Those are also awesome. And also I recommend for most people to do not directly overhead, not like on a 90-degree bench. And I would, generally speaking, I'd recommend doing them seated. Yes, standing is more functional. And yes, if you do it without ego, you're totally fine. And if you're really good at bracing and doing the right things below the shoulders with your body, bracing, making sure you're not overarching your back, not using a ton of momentum, things like that, then that's fine. But for the most part, seated is going to be more stable, so more potential muscle growth opportunity. And it's also most likely going to be safer. But the main benefit of seated is you don't have to push straight over your head. You can put the bench on like a 70 if your shoulders are a little banged up, maybe 60-degree incline, and you're still going to get tons of front delt stimulus from it, but you're not quite relying on pristine shoulder mobility. Because again, just like objectively, most people, to include me, I don't do direct overhead presses either, don't have that mobility. And if you don't have those prerequisites and again, the lack of ego, then the overhead press is going to probably be a net negative for you long term. And that is why I think it's overrated. Is it a great lift on paper? Is it a great lift for some people? Could it be a great lift for most people if they put the work in and they did the right things and they approach it the right way? Yes. But as it stands now, it's not appropriate for a lot more people than it is appropriate for, and therefore it's overrated. All right, last one. Tib raises for run and ruck performance and durability. Overrated only because of the recent like knee over toes movement. Not that I have anything whatsoever against like knees over toes guy. I think his stuff's awesome, but I do think that he places a little bit more emphasis on the tibs than I think is necessary, especially because the soleus, which is on the other side, your lower calf, your meaty lower calf that kind of connects below your gastroc and kind of goes down into your Achilles, takes a lot more of a pounding than your tibs do with running and rucking. So while you definitely should train your tibs, absolutely, you shouldn't put more emphasis on the tibs than the soleus. You should put a lot more emphasis on the soleus by doing seated calf raises, standing calf raises, donkey calf raises, whatever have you, than tib raises. And additionally, it's also overrated because a lot of people just do body weight tib raises like forever. And again, it's kind of like the TRX stuff I was talking about earlier. The only way to really progress it is to just add reps, add reps, add reps. And when you're doing 60, 70, 80 reps of something, because you could easily get up there with body weight tib raises, you're kind of not really, it's very inefficient, time inefficient, and also fatigue inefficient. And it's also not going to really strengthen that part of your leg in the way that you want it to, like tendon strength and whatnot. So I really like, other than actually doing the running and rucking, which is by far, well-programmed running and rucking is by far the best way to improve your durability and performance and good recovery. But other than that, if you want to kind of add a cherry on top, I would focus on mostly seated calf raises. Seated calf raises are less effective for growth, but they target the soleus really, really well. And also seated calf raises are great for ankle mobility if you do them this way. So basically what you do is a 3-second negative and a 3 to 5 second pause at the bottom of every rep, not just some reps, every rep. And you want to keep, especially seated, you want to keep the rep range low, like 5 to 8, maybe up to 10 reps. But if you think about it, each rep's taking you about 10 seconds. By the way, you're going up, like not crazy powerfully, but like at a regular cadence. Each rep's going to take you like 8 to 10 seconds. So a set of 6 is going to be almost a minute. So you got to kind of factor that in. But it's going to be significantly more effective at A, growing your calves, B, strengthening your calves, C, safer on the Achilles, much safer on the Achilles. It's way less likely to cause like Achilles tendonitis than the way most people do calf raises, where they just bounce up and down, bounce up and down. And like I said, it's going to really improve your ankle mobility. If when you're at the bottom, what I like to do, especially on the seated, is drive my toes up towards my shin when I'm at the bottom. It's called dorsiflexion, and it places even more of a stretch on your calves, and it just makes the rep way more effective for not just growth, but also durability. So that's the way I would do it. And again, you should definitely do tib raises. Make sure you load them. If you don't have a tib machine at your gym, they're kind of uncommon. You can get a tib bar. They're probably, I don't know, 20 to $40. Or you can do single leg ones with kettlebells where you kind of loop it around your foot and do single leg tib raises like that. So I would say, if we're trying to get some sort of ratio, I'd say like 70-30 calf raises to tib raises would be probably a pretty reasonable one. And you are not going to be bulletproof, unlike what a lot of people say about just doing a bunch of tib raises. They'll bulletproof your knees, bulletproof whatever. It's not the case. I know it's just a marketing term, but still you can get injured no matter whatever you do in training, but you will definitely be more durable and your lower legs will get less beat up over time when you're doing a lot of running and rucking. So that's it, guys. I am for sure going to do a part 2 of this because I got a bunch more, but we are done for today. I can feel myself losing my ability to speak. It's a lot of off the cuff talking. And so I figured take a little time, come back with a part 2 when I'm fresh and continue. So thank you guys for participating. Really appreciate anyone who left a topic for me to discuss. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you agree with, what you don't agree with, and let's start a conversation. Would love that. So thank you guys very much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode. Till then, Terminator out.